So 4 years ago, I joined Intridia, which is a company that was founded on the belief that you should be able to live and work anywhere you want. I joined a fully distributed team. What this means is that even though we have headquarters in Washington, D.C., just 2 blocks from the White House, even the folks who live around there are not required to go in. And so today I'm going to talk about what does that even mean to be part of a fully distributed team, the preconceptions, misconceptions, some of the arguments against it, and hopefully debunking some of the notions that even you may have about fully remote distributed teams. So before I get started, I do want to learn a little bit more about you all. If you can do me a favor and put your hands up just for 2 questions. Question number 1 is, how many of you currently work regularly with a coworker that is not in the same office as you, that you work remotely? That is a lot of you, okay. That is so much more than when I asked the same question a year ago. So this is really exciting. So for those of you who did not put your hands up, or maybe even some of you who did, when you hear remote working, how many of you have either had the response of, I can't do that, that's not for me, that wouldn't work, or I would love to work from home, but my company would never go for it? How many of you have had either one of those reactions? Okay, there's a good amount of you. That was about a quarter of you. So good, you're in the right place. When I first describe to people how I work, I inevitably come across a lot of different questions that people ask me. And the first one might be, well, what exactly is it that you do? What type of company could possibly function by not having anybody work in the same office as each other? And when I tell them it's software development, they might imagine that we're a loosely tied together band of freelancers, maybe like an Elance or like a 99 Designs. And that's couldn't be further from the truth. What we actually are fully salaried with benefits. We're a real company. And what we do is build custom web and mobile applications for a variety of clients, from enterprise Fortune 500 to startups. Lately, we've been doing a lot of dashboards for big data. And so they go, okay, wow, you do real work. You're not just kind of playing around. And so the next question that people ask me is, exactly how distributed are you? They might imagine that we're 8 people who maybe started a company in the East Coast and a couple of us wanted to move out west. Well, that's actually not true either. We're about 40 people strong, scattered across 20 different cities, which span every time zone here in the US, as well as China, Italy, Russia, or wherever an Intridian might be happening to travel at the time. So this past summer, our CEO spent a month working from Australia, and during that time, he brought on our first CTO and managed various client relationships. So just in case it's not incredibly obvious by now, we think that remote working is great. So much so that last year we launched a site called yourtime.intridia.com, where we asked all of our employees to calculate how many hours they save by not having to commute from their home to an office space, and then tell us what have they done with all those hours that they've recaptured. And we got all these amazing stories from people, such as Linus, our QA engineer, picked up piano again for the first time after not having played it for 15 years, and he plays piano for his friends on the weekends. And so, you know, if working remotely, working distributed is so great and so wonderful, why don't more companies do it? So when you hear success stories of people who really succeed and win at working in this fully distributed work culture, you usually hear about product companies. So GitHub, Automatic WordPress are 2 great names that come up a lot when you talk about distributed work teams. But arguably, it is hard sometimes. And arguably, for us, it's even harder. You see, instead of just building one product, because we work for client services, we're building wildly different products for wildly different businesses, but every time using this same special methodology that we've come up with over the years. And so it isn't always easy. Even though it's really great, you get all these benefits and kind of perks and flexible work schedule and well-being, it can be really hard if you don't do it right. And so whether you are about to join a remote team, or maybe your team is shifting to be more remote, maybe you manage a remote team, or maybe you yourself are the head of a company and you're trying to wonder if maybe you should shift your company to be more distributed, well, I have the solution for you. And it's really easy. It's easy to remember. It's a mantra that I actually say to all of our employees who come start working for us, and it's this. It sounds a little silly, but you're going to remember it. 1 is shower, 2 is be human, and 3 is stick with it. And I'll walk through what those mean throughout the rest of my talk. This mantra, these 3 things, shower, be human, stick with it, are in direct response to 3 categories of complaints that I hear the most often when I talk about distributed work. So all of the different complaints and what ifs and that's not going to work can probably be categorized into about 3 things. And those are, I can't work effectively at home. I can't be productive. Or secondly, decisions are made in person. They're not made scattered across the world. Or lastly, I feel isolated without an office. I feel lonely. So let's go through each of these one by one. The first one is the easiest one. Let's start with a softball. I can't work effectively at home. I can't be productive. Well, my answer to that is really simple. Introduce some separation of when you're at home and relaxing versus work mode. Shower, put on pants. One of the biggest misconceptions that I get a lot from people who aren't familiar with working remotely or distributed is that we all just work in our pajamas. And yes, that's the title of my talk. Absolutely, sometimes I work in my pajamas. Last week we went through a whole rebrand and a relaunch of our website. And when I'm down in the trenches with my team, absolutely, I'm going to roll out of bed and open up my laptop and start working in my pajamas. And it's wonderful that I have the flexibility to do so. That's the whole point of working this way, is that I have a flexibility to work exactly the way that I want. However, most of the time, it really behooves me to introduce a separation between home and relaxing and sleeping and hanging out versus work mode. So shower, put on pants, dress like you're going to work. And then the next extension of that is, again, this flexibility where you can adapt your work environment to suit your particular quirks and needs and likes. So for your work environment, get that comfy chair that's going to be just right for you. This is my work desk. I've got this nice red leather chair that I just curl up in. Or if you're a standing desk person, treadmill desk person, bouncy ball person, do that. Get that. You're no longer dictated by what the office has bought for you. You know, you don't work well in a Herman Miller chair, then get a bouncy ball, get a treadmill desk. So your work environment is really important. And then the next thing that really helps is, you can do this now, even if you don't work remotely. Pay attention to what makes you productive. So at your most productive hour, notice what you did right before it, notice what you're doing during it. And for me, over the years, there's 3 things that I need, 3 things that I take with me at all times, have with me at all times, that automatically trigger work mode. And those 3 things are a mug of tea, usually peppermint. So anywhere I go, I can find this mug of tea. Headphones so that I can put on my music. And then finally, my favorite wireless mouse, which I don't have with me, but this mouse I've used for so long. It's my favorite mouse. I've used it for so long that the track wheel, the scroll wheel, actually doesn't work anymore. But I like it because it's able to work on any surface. And so what's really amazing once you start paying attention to these triggers that get you into work mode, get you into productivity mode, is that you can start working from anywhere. Not just your home, not just your office, not just your coffee shop. And that opens up this wild world of possibilities. So last year, I had the incredible opportunity to work a month from Southeast Asia, most of it spending in Vietnam. And because I have these triggers that can cue me into work mode from wherever I am, I've worked from ferries, I've worked from trains, I've worked from airports, I've worked from a hut in the middle of nowhere, I've worked from coffee houses that were very westernized and coffee houses that weren't so westernized. As long as I've got the Wi-Fi and these triggers that get me into work mode, I can get working and be productive from anywhere, pretty much anywhere that I want. And this takes training, this takes time, but I would recommend for all of you, pay attention the next time when you're really productive and cranking out work to see what those triggers are and start building those triggers for yourself. The more portable those triggers are, the more you can have this freedom to work and be productive from anywhere. So if you say you can't work effectively at home, pay attention to what actually makes you effective. Is it the office space? Is it a cubicle? Chances are it's not. Chances are it's specific things that help you be productive. And introduce a little bit of that separation, especially if you're working from home. Shower, put on pants. So the second complaint or question that I get a lot from people are, decisions are made in person. Important decisions can't be made over email or instant message. And my answer to that is, what kind of decisions are you making? What kind of answers do you need that are so urgent? If we were all to just be a little bit more human in the expectations and dependencies that we're introducing in the workplace, my hunch is that as much as 80% of these decisions and answers that you need can be prevented or are not as dire and urgent as you think that they may be. And so I say this phrase a lot, be human. It means a lot of different things, and I'll break that down. So breaking it down, what does it mean when somebody says that I need to answer right now, I need a decision? So usually how this happens is, give you one example. Let's say you're a developer and maybe you're coding along and all of a sudden you can't continue because you need access to a server or you need access to a database and you can't get it yourself because you don't have the login and you need to find somebody else to get it for you. My hypothesis, my suggestion to you is that that kind of panic, that kind of problem can be prevented 80% of the time if you just plan in advance. So let go of this idea that everything needs to happen right now. Everything needs to happen on your schedule. Just recognize that you're working with other humans. You're not working with these machines that automatically give you output when you give a command. You're working with these other people who didn't come to work solely for the purpose of making your job easier. And so if you just plan in advance and think about the work you're going to do well before you're actually going to do it, and introduce all these dependencies and problems and questions before they actually become a problem for you, you can prevent or avoid these panics, these fires, 80% of the time. It's not just something that you have to do on your own. So again, we've kind of overhauled our project management process to make it work for this distributed team, to make it work for these different time zones and people working in different pieces. And one of the tools that really helps us do that is JIRA. We're here at Atlassian. So one of the things that we've done, our process is loosely based on Scrum Agile, if you all are familiar with that. There is one time, this is a way that we hack our time zones. So we work from all different time zones. This is one of the ways that we hack it, is there is one time a week where every person in a project team, so our project teams average about 5 or 6 designers, developers, and 1 project manager. There's one time during the week where those people who are working on that one project meet on a conference call over GoToMeeting where we do screen share and they discuss all the features and work that they have to do for that week, for that sprint. And from that, we're not just talking about what we need to do, we're talking about what could possibly go wrong. And all of that gets dumped into the JIRA tickets. So I'm willing to bet that our JIRA tickets have more words than yours do. So what do we put in this JIRA ticket? In the description field, we use it to track up to 4 different things. So we track it, we use it to track the requirements, which is what most probably JIRA tickets use, maybe even some implementation details. And then in addition to that, we track the edge cases. So during this planning session, the only time that we're all talking together at the same time, we talk about what could possibly go wrong. What are the edge cases that might come up as we develop the solution? And third, we track the questions that come up. So what have we not been able to resolve yet, but somebody needs to go research and think about when they start working on the solution? A subset of those questions is design challenges. So we also use this for designers, not just developers. So in terms of design challenges, for this particular feature that we're building, is there a particular UI, user experience that is uncommon, that doesn't follow a common design pattern? And then finally, we'll track the background context. So not just the requirements or technical specifications, but any quotes from our clients, any guidance, any white papers, anything that the client has given us that we can use to help navigate towards a solution. And all of this gets thrown into JIRA from that one planning session so that 3 days later, when whoever's assigned to work on it starts working, this jogs their memory. Not only that, not only does this jog their memory of what they need to think about as they start working towards their solution, but hopefully in those 3 days leading up to it, it's been in the back of their mind. And not only their mind, but the minds of the other people on the call. Maybe it was relevant to somebody else's experience, and they can start thinking about the solution as well. And in that way, by the time you actually start working and start writing your first line of code, there's already been this forethought. There's already been this planning in advance. Okay, so now we've planned, we've put down the use cases, we've put down all the edge cases, and we've thought about what could possibly go wrong with the solution, and we've started to percolate it in our heads. Well, okay, there's still 20% there. There are still going to be questions that come up. There's still going to be dependencies that you have on other people. In no way am I suggesting that we're these siloed people who don't rely on each other as a team. That's not the case at all. We rely on each other all the time. We need to collaborate. It's just letting go of this need for instant communication. So trust in asynchronous communication. What do I mean by that? This is where our HipChat really comes in, as well as our JIRA, which I've already talked about. Our HipChats are set up in such a way that for every project team, so again, we work on probably about 8 to 13 projects at any given time. Every project team has their own project room. And then if you are working on your project at a time, you're expected to have that room open. Even if you're not actively participating, you get to see it go by. And maybe you participate, maybe you jump in. In addition to that, we also have discipline rooms. So we have a room for all developers. It's #dev, where all the developers get to just geek out over a new library that they found, a best practice that they're trying to instill, or even better, troubleshooting a certain line of code, so that they're not just limited to this immediate project team of 5 or 6 people. They've also got the network of the entire company to lean upon. And there's a sense of kind of transparency. Again, each one of those project rooms are open so that anybody can dive into there. Anybody can hop in, peek at old search transcripts. So maybe you know that this other project, you've caught wind that they work on something that's similar to what you're about to tackle. Go into that project room, search some transcripts, engage with the people in that room, and there's all this kind of flow that happens between project teams. But what do I mean about asynchronous communication? So something that I tell people all the time is don't get yourself out of this work mode of relying on instant, in real-time conversations. If you have a question, hopefully by now you've reduced enough of the dependency, enough of the fires that you can put something out there, wait 3 or 4 hours for the answer, maybe even 24 hours, but in that time you're not blocked. In that time you can either continue forward with your task or you can switch to some other thing and do it concurrently. But if you do have an answer to put out or a question to put out there, throw it out there. Every now and then I still get a conversation that goes something like this, and it's usually in the form of a private message in HipChat, and they start off by going, "Hey, are you there?" Don't do that. Put your question there, because that means I'm doing my thing, I'm going about my work, and then when I'm available, when I have a good lull in between tasks, I can see what you've posted in my message, or preferably even better, in the project room, and I can answer it right there. I don't have to take you out of whatever you're doing, and you don't have to take me out of whatever I'm doing, and still the answer still happens. The other place that we leverage this asynchronous communication is, we've talked about the JIRA ticket already, but we also use Confluence to track everything, especially when we're in a discovery phase for a new project where we're just immersing ourselves in our client's business and learning everything that we can about the problem that they've asked us to solve. We capture everything inside Confluence, whether it's user scenarios, whether it's industry research, whether it's design inspiration. That all goes into Confluence. And again, this is because every project in JIRA and Confluence is open. It's not just accessible to those 5 or 6 or 12 people who are working on that team. It's anybody. It's even the directors or our CEO. If they caught wind that maybe a project is a little rocky and isn't going so well, they can go into that project and see how many open tickets there are and see exactly how well or how poor it's doing. And the great thing about this, of keeping all this conversation in JIRA and Confluence, is that it gets it out of a person's inbox. So this is a thing that I talk about all the time, is get out of the inbox. It is a silo. It is a vacuum that only exists between 2 people or however many people are on the list. But if you throw it into JIRA, if you flow it into Confluence, it's accessible to everybody. It's accessible to anybody who needs it, and they can drop in. And especially if you've got a culture where these tools have been well adopted, they know to look there first. And so, stepping back for a second, this is all about reducing the number of times that you have to depend on somebody. Reducing the number of times where you're forced to get somebody and distract them out of their work. And the really interesting byproduct of that is that when you do interact with somebody, neither of you are flustered or aggravated that you've been distracted from something. It becomes a much more quality interaction because both of you are choosing and enjoying it. Along those same lines, we hire very much for cultural fit. If any of you attended our panel here yesterday, we talked a lot about cultural fit and hiring the right people, and that is so integral to making this whole remote distributed teams work. So assuming that we've succeeded in hiring a certain quadrant of people, the smart and nice people, the people that you like, it's a very natural human behavior to respond more, to respond better to people that you genuinely like. So, okay, let's say that we've succeeded, we've gotten our hiring process down, and we've gotten people in the door who are smart and talented and likable. Because we're this distributed team and we don't get to see each other in office happy hours or hang out on the weekends, that's actually not enough. We actually need to bring our personalities to work. So every time we have an interaction with a team member, we have to make it count, and not just from a work perspective. We're not just these robots writing code or filing tickets. We have personalities, and we in particular bring those personalities to our work. And the way that we do that is through using GoToMeeting and turning on video chat every time. HipChat, where I've told you about our project rooms and our dev room or our UX room. we've also got a water cooler room. So just like your water cooler in your traditional office space, this is where people just post cat pictures or what they're eating for lunch. And this is the most active room that we have because everybody participates in it, from our developers to our HR to our marketing. And it's also the most valuable because this is where we find out all those delightful things about each other that are completely unrelated to work. And what's really amazing about us doing this in HipChat instead of, say, your traditional office space water cooler is that everybody gets to eavesdrop in on that conversation. So let's say that you've got a holiday coming up, and let's say you're about to go to Italy for 2 weeks on a honeymoon or something. And you could really benefit from some tips on where to go. So in your traditional office space environment, this probably comes up in conversation, and maybe you're lucky enough to talk to Susie who went there last summer, and she's going to give you some tips. Well, there's the rest of the company where folks are probably more than happy to help you out as well. What's really amazing about having this water cooler inside HipChat is that everybody else gets to listen in on as well. And you get to hear all these tips from all these other people who happen to see through the transcript that, hey, you're going to Italy soon. And so all of a sudden, you get to know so many other different people inside the company. How many of you have been in an office environment where, sure, you occupy the same physical space, but do you really know what that person 3 rows over from you does on their weekend? Maybe not. In our HipChat, everybody keeps an eye on what those things are, and you get to chime in when you have similar interests. By the way, HuBot is on here because we also wrote this really great script to automatically create a birthday meme when somebody's birthday. We have this policy where if it's your birthday, you automatically get the day off. It's amazing how many inside jokes you would think that this distributed company who only sees each other for an annual company retreat or some client kickoffs wouldn't have anything fun about them. It's amazing how many inside jokes we actually have as this distributed company. So these are our custom HipChat emoticons. These are probably our favorite things. And behind every one of these, there's a story. And I'm not going to go through each and every one of them. But there's a lot of coffee drinkers. And there's a lot of snobby, fancy coffee drinkers. And so the coffee emoticon wasn't enough. We had to have Italian coffee. And after that, we had to have the Illy coffee. The same with beer. Beer, okay. There's also a group of hardcore whiskey drinkers and scotch lovers in our company. So we needed an emoticon for Jameson. What's funny about our distributed team is a lot of times, because we work different schedules, we don't work a 9 to 5. Even if we did, all of our time zones means that 9 to 5 happens a lot of different times. So a lot of times we'll post a status in our HipChat room of saying, okay, I'm heading out, or I'll be back later. That gets tedious to write, and so we came up with this emoticon, ducks out, for if you're heading out and you're going to be unavailable for a while, we just kind of make this little flying duck show up. And of course, that wasn't good enough for anybody who was still playing video games in the early 90s. Kirby out is kind of our new favorite way to say, see you later. And then we also tell each other when we are going out to lunch, just so we know what each other is up to, and Chompy works out really well for that. So again, if you have a lot of decisions to make, if you need things from other people, the answer here is really not forcing yourselves to be in the same physical space. It's just planning in advance and being more human, being a little bit more aware of the expectations and dependencies and needs that you're introducing in the workplace with your fellow team members. And then finally, the last question or complaint that I hear is, I feel isolated without an office. I get lonely without coworkers. And this one's actually true. This one will happen. So what I tell people who come to work for us is the first couple weeks may be great. You might be really enjoying this refreshing change from commuting to work every day, or it's a new job, it's a new challenge, and so you're giving it 100%. But then after 1 or 2 months, yes, there is going to be this slump that happens where you look around, especially if you work just from home, and there's nobody around. And you realize that these people that you've been chatting with and writing code alongside of, you've never actually met them. You've never actually had a real conversation with them outside of work, and you're going to go, what am I doing? I'm siloed out. And the answer to this is, again, bring yourself to work, bring your personality. Don't just talk about your projects. Don't just talk about your IDE or what language you're using. Talk about your days, talk about your significant others, talk about your pets, talk about your hobbies. So that's kind of solution number one. Just remember to bring yourself to work, bring your personality to work. But then the other thing is meet other people. So what's really lovely about the way that we work is we don't enforce this vacuum. We don't say to our employees, keep everything that's in Tridia inside in Tridia, because we've got some super stealth things going on. We fully encourage people to go outside and meet other people and bring it back. And all these things go towards sticking with it and powering through. So for example, what I do, I don't work from home all the time, or even most of the time. I choose to work out of a co-working space. So this co-working space is just a couple blocks from here. And from there, I'm working alongside of all these other people, also in tech, and I'm geeking out over game development, Python, mobile design, and guess what? I get to bring it back to my company. Because I have all these interactions with people outside my company on a frequent basis, we are smarter and we work faster and we're more on the edge of everything that's relevant to us and our clients than a company that is in a vacuum, that does only kind of talk to each other. In addition to this, we also give stipends to all of our employees. We're across 20 different cities, and in each and every single one of those cities, there is a thriving tech hub. There is a meetup community. We do Ruby on Rails. There's probably either a strong or a growing Ruby on Rails presence, and we will give stipends to each and every one of our employees to go out and sponsor a meetup. We encourage our folks to submit talks to conferences, and if they get accepted, we send them to it, no questions asked. We also have a conference budget where every person gets their pick of a conference to go to, and depending on how far it is, if it's in Paris, France, or Hawaii, then maybe we'll only be able to go towards half of it. But the idea is that we want to get you out there, and we send people to conferences. Usually, if they're going to a conference, they're going with some other Intridian as well, so that's an opportunity to meet each other. There's this common misconception that just because we work as a distributed team, we actually don't want to see each other, and that's not true at all. We fully value the face-to-face communications. The only difference that we have from other companies, more traditional companies, is that we don't believe our work depends on that instant face-to-face communication. However, when we get the opportunity to have it, we make full use of it. So company retreats, client kickoffs, sales pitches, or these conferences where we make an active effort to get several different Intridians at the same time meeting up, because these are kind of rare moments, because our work doesn't depend on these face-to-face. When they happen, it's just that much more valuable, and we get that much more out of it. So if you feel isolated without an office, my suggestion here, my advice, is just to stick with it. And the way to stick with it is to bring yourself to work and meet other people outside of work. Go outside to coffee shops, go outside to meetups, go outside to co-working spaces, and bring it back. And what you see is this thing that starts happening with your work. It's no longer this place that you go to just from 9 to 5, and it's no longer this thing that you do only between these set hours. It starts becoming this thing that you do because you love it. It's this thing that you do because you're doing meaningful work, you're making meaningful contributions to this activity that you actually feel really passionate about, that you really enjoy. And what starts happening is this thing that you do called work, it starts just being one component of this overall lifestyle, this overall holistic lifestyle. What I'll leave you with is one of my favorite quotes from one of our designers. And this is something that he said a couple months ago. He posted on Twitter. He said, I just got to run upstairs and see my son take his first steps. I love working from home. You would too. And so you see, it's not just work. It is a lifestyle. And it's something that we mean when we say that. Thank you so much. I think I've got some time for questions.
So we have a couple minutes for questions before we go off to break.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm sure you run into challenges with keeping your distributed teams motivated, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you've got sprint commitments, then keeping them to come up with, during sprint review, meet those commitments. So how do you do that, and what do you do when that process sort of breaks down? How do you re-motivate the team?
Yep. So the question was, especially since we're a distributed team and maybe we don't have perks like happy hours or big parties, how do we keep our team motivated, especially a development team during a sprint or during those long slogs towards the end of a project? And there's actually two ways that we do this. One is that we frequently have informal interviews where we ask people what they're interested in working on. And we're lucky enough that we have a wide enough breadth of clients and projects that we make an active effort to pair people's interests up with the needs of a project. So let's say, as a developer, somebody really wants to delve into JavaScript or delve into learning Backbone as a new technology. Well, we'll find a project that has that need and pair it up with that person. And so there's some interest alignment there. And the other thing that we do is we tend to hire folks who in the previous life was maybe an entrepreneur or maybe a freelance developer, or maybe somebody who has ideas all the time and is the type of person who tinkers on projects on the weekends outside of work. And so we introduced a idea called Spark Time. And during their work hours, if they have an idea that they really believe in, and they want to build it, they have to come up with the plan. They have to come with a roadmap, and we fit it into the schedule just like any other project. But we do have this time set aside where, hey, if you've spent 9 months working on a client project and you want something completely different, come up with your idea. We'll let you do it during Spark Time. And usually one of the requirements of that is contributing it back out to open source. So we're also really big open source advocates. We do a lot of Rails gems and fonts and what have you. So yeah, those are the two ways that we keep everybody motivated and happy.
How do you avoid to be sidetracked by, let's say, news articles or mailing lists and interesting links? For example, when I go to a website to find a solution for a particular problem, it's happening that I spend more time reading articles related to that problem that I should do. So what do you recommend to keep focused on the actual tasks?
Okay, so the question is, especially when tackling a new problem, it's really easy to get lost in the rabbit hole of research and thinking what to do. The way that we get around that is reminding people all the time that even though you may be working by yourself in your home office, there's actually a lot of other brilliant people who are there working with you. It's just that they're across the country. And to talk out loud. When you're researching a problem, don't just while away 3 hours Googling. go into the dev room, talk about the problem. As you do a little bit more research, talk about it there, and chances are there's going to be other people who have come across something like it before. We actually have a small group of fellows, of engineers who have just been in the industry for a very long time, spend a lot of their time doing R&D, and tap into those resources so that you aren't on a singular track and you don't get lost. So a lot of communication and remembering that you're not in it alone is one way that we combat that.
Hi, I was just wondering, ballpark, how often you see people face to face? Once a month, once a quarter, once a year?
That's a good question. So again, we have 2 annual retreats, one in the US and one in China. We just happen to have a lot of folks over in that area. And so that's kind of the guaranteed. Once a year, everybody as a big group, we get a big house and we spend the weekend together. Other than that, the typical employee, the typical team member probably sees some other Intridian every, I would say, 3 months.
Thanks. I think we have time for one more.
So when you work from home, when do you know and how do you know that you're done for the day? How can you say, okay, I'm stopping today for today? I close my computer. Yep.
This is, so the question was, when you're working from home, how do you know when you're done for the day? When do you know that, okay, this is the time I can shut off my computer and be done? This is the reason why most of our team members and the hiring profile that has worked the best for us is people who used to freelance or is people who used to run their own business, because that is a key trait of working as part of a distributed team is time management. So there isn't going to be anybody who tells you, okay, today you have to work 3 hours on this and it's between 4 and 7 p.m. That doesn't happen. It's you know what you need to accomplish by the end of that week. Part of it is having very clear communication between, if you're a developer, between your developer and the project manager to talk about how long I think this particular task is going to take. And then sure, a project manager can help direct you on priorities and what should come first or how to simplify a certain task. But apart from that, you know that these are the 4 things that you need to accomplish between Monday and end of Friday. And it's up to you when that happens.
Thanks very much, Patti.
Thank you.